Well, good morning, you guys. My name is Nate, and I'm the lead pastor of the Front Church. And if you're new, perhaps you're watching online and you're new, perhaps you're in-house and you're new, maybe you're not particularly religious, maybe you're from another tradition, we just want to say welcome. We're creating the Front Church for you because we want to invite as many people as possible to experience Jesus' story. And before we kind of get into the message this morning, I do think it's important to just kind of address the moment that we're finding ourselves in right now. When I saw the mask mandate happen, I thought my work day was done on Friday. I'd finished up my last little email, put the bow on the work week, and then I saw the mask mandate, and I was like, my work day is not done. And I think that all of us, that hit us with different feelings. Some of us, it might be sadness. Some of us, it might be anger. Some of us just don't understand it. Some of us, I think we also kind of have this kind of PTSD thing welling up inside of us. And we're like, are we doing this again? And I think all that kind of, boom, just comes right to the surface. And I think there's a collective exhaustion. Or we're just, man, tired. I'm tired. I feel tired. And the verse that keeps coming to my mind is Romans 12, verse 18, which says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I think that it's often in the hard times and the difficult times, whether you're mad, angry, sad, wherever you're at in the emotional spectrum, I think in the hard times, those are times where Jesus really has an opportunity to form something in us. But I think if we aren't careful, we'll miss it. We'll miss it in our fury, or we'll miss it in our grief, or our sadness. And my encouragement to you guys would be, don't miss it. And your first calling is not, you're not a Republican first. You're not a Democrat first. You're not a whatever other political party you are first. You are not an American first. You are not whatever identity marker first. Your first calling is you are a person of Jesus, a person who belongs to Jesus. And Jesus has a peculiar way that he wants us to live in our world. And he wants to form us into more loving, more forgiving, more patient. What's the fruit of the Spirit? The kids sing a song about it over at Kid Front. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. He wants to form those things in us. But we got to kind of use these moments, and instead of turning to that automatic emotion, turn to Jesus and say, okay, I don't like this. Don't let me miss how you want to form me. Don't miss how he wants to form you. Any skiers or snowboarders in the room this morning? I am not raising my hand because I'm a skier or snowboarder. I'm more a ski lodge guy myself. I really like the ski lodge. I like the fire. I'm more of a, let's watch the other people ski. And I'll sit by the fire in the ski lodge and I'll bring a good book. I've read some good books this year. I read one book that was instant nostalgia for me. NBA Jam, the book. It's a book about the video game. It was brilliant. It was so fun to read. I read another book, top 5 book all time for me, called Beneath the Scarlet Sky. It's this historical fiction thing that's based on a true story where I was literally weeping at several parts of the book. And one time I came in, because Robin read it too, I came in the living room and I saw her just weeping, and I was like, you read it, didn't you? So good, so good. I read a book this year called, not this year, like last year. I haven't read 4 books this year. I read a book called the Making Sense of God by Tim Keller. Tim Keller's like a pro at addressing kind of the feelings and the sentiments and the doubts and the questions of people, our friends, our peers, ourselves. And so that was a really good book. But one of my favorites this last year was a book called Pappyland. Pappyland, the story of family fine bourbon and the things that last, written by a guy named Wright Thompson. He's a senior writer at ESPN, but I read this book because it was kind of a merger of my two of my passions, good books and bourbon. And so Thompson's book surprised me because I read it thinking, I'm going to learn about the story of Pappy. Maybe you know about Pappy, maybe you don't. It's okay if you don't. What's important for us this morning is there's a cult following. Like, people wait in line for hours for the chance to buy a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. There's a family story around it. This is a bottle that you buy on the shelf at the store for $70, and it sells for $1,000. You buy on the shelf at a store for $300, and it sells for $5,000. People are crazy about Pappy. Utah has a lottery for the chance to win the opportunity to buy a bottle of Pappy. I picked up the book because I wanted to learn a little bit about the Pappy story, but I was surprised because what I got instead, and Wright Thompson set out to write a book about Pappy, but what he ended up writing was this deeply personal memoir, talking about life, talking about his experiences with his dad, talking about him and his wife's journey with infertility, talking about finally his wife is pregnant. And the time that he's doing these interviews and building this book is also the time that he's thinking about fatherhood, which is just on the horizon for him. And it is beautiful. And so I'm going to break from routine this morning. And I want to read a few passages from this book. And the reason I'm doing this is I actually want to give your mind permission to wander a little bit this morning. Permission to kind of chase the rabbit trail if you kind of catch your mind going a certain direction. But I think this will set us up well for where we're going. Thompson writes, I was born in a mask. The monk and philosopher Thomas Merton wrote, he lived and wrote in a monastery in Kentucky. I began to read lots of Merton, trying to make sense of how my need to run, that's to go, achieve, that need to run, was being replaced by a desire to stay. All my running felt like a mask. Bourbon is a mask too. It's something put on to hide or amplify. Pappy isn't my mask, but I definitely wear them. ESPN is a mask. Writing a book on the New York Times bestseller list is a mask. And Merton is aiming his critique at people, or at himself, and at everyone who has ever strived for anything. And what is Pappy if not the result of striving, sold mostly to strivers? Check this next one out. Our being is not to be enriched by activity and experience as such. Everything depends on the quality of our acts and experiences. We are so obsessed with doing that we have no time and no imagination left for being. Why then do we continue to pursue joys without substance, Merton wrote? Because the pursuit itself has become our only substitute for joy. Unable to rest in anything we achieve, we determine to forget our discontent in a ceaseless quest for new satisfactions. In this pursuit, desire itself becomes our chief satisfaction. What's he saying there? He's saying we kind of got addicted to the chase. Wright is reflecting on Thomas Merton, and he says, we're actually more addicted and we enjoyed the pursuit more than the actual thing we were pursuing. This go, achieve. It's actually the thing that we think we're after isn't really the thing we're after. And we become so good at settling for this pseudo joy that we're missing real joy. And Thompson continues in his book. He says, in the last years of his life, Alabama football coach Bear Bryant read a devotional over and over again, a window into how he appraised his successful and famous life, his own sorting out of the things he gained and what it cost him. When tomorrow comes, it read, this day will be gone forever, leaving something in its place I have traded for it. I feel like I am forever making bad trades. Anyone been there? Anyone there? Where's my life? Where'd it go? How did I get here? Do you guys know the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Knowledge is just like learning. Just learn to learn. We live in a knowledge-addicted culture, in a knowledge-addicted world. Like in our knowledge-addicted world, we just learn to learn. We just want to learn more stuff. Gimme, gimme, gimme. So in any moment of quiet or stillness or boredom, we reach for our device to fill our minds with knowledge on our news feeds, right? We're reaching for podcasts. We're reaching for... Scott, can you just bump my mic down a nose? It's in the B section, I think. Just a nose. It'll get rid of some of that feedback. Thank you. But we're just addicted to knowledge. We just want to learn. And the difference between knowledge and wisdom is wisdom sits with knowledge. Wisdom stops to listen. Wisdom makes adjustments. We're knowledge-addicted churches, too. If you've grown up in church, maybe you would recognize them. The way that we often recognize knowledge addiction in church is we confuse spiritual maturity for knowledge acquisition. We want to go deep. The more you know. But spiritual maturity, Jesus tells us, is not measured in knowledge acquisition, but it's measured in love of our neighbor. That should trigger us, especially in this heated COVID-19 moment where we have all sorts of opinions about all sorts of things. Spiritual maturity is not knowledge acquisition. Spiritual maturity is measured in our love of our neighbor. We're in this knowledge-addicted world. And how do you know if this is a sea you're swimming in? What do you do when you're bored? Do you just be bored? Are you reaching for something? Do you know how I know if I'm drowning in the sea of knowledge addiction? The way I know it and recognize it in myself is, am I giving myself time to wonder? I do my best wondering when I'm driving. But in order to wonder and drive, I can't turn on a podcast. I can't turn on an audiobook. I just have to start driving. And there's that awkward moment where you get bored, and in the boredom, you want to reach, right? And you actually have to kind of wait out the boredom to get to the wonder, where your mind starts to think about things, starts to spin. It doesn't you're not just cramming it full of something else because you're going stir crazy. I don't think we give ourselves time to wonder. And this morning, I wanted all of us to give one another a little bit of time to wonder. When's the last time you allowed yourself permission to not fill an empty moment? When's the last time you allowed your permission to not be productive? To use Wright Thompson's line, we've become really good at making bad trades. But wisdom sits with knowledge. Wisdom stops to listen. Wisdom adjusts. I started working from a co-working space in Lehigh called Kiln this week. It's awesome. Such a cool little spot. I also feel very productive being around really productive people. And if you start working there, they make you attend an orientation, and they tell you the company's values. They have 3 values. I don't remember the first 2. The third is community. Community, a value of a co-working space. They have Waffle Wednesday once a month. I'm so pumped. They have a happy hour one Thursday a month. They talk about how they want this to be a place not just of workspace, but of connection and community. Why would I get so excited about a workspace that values community and has Waffle Wednesday and has a happy hour once a month on Thursday. Why would that excite me so much? Because I'm lonely. And I don't think I'm the only one. Skye Jethani says, sometimes the worst loneliness happens in a crowd. Like, you can be the total extrovert, you got all the friends, but you know in your spirit, you're lonely. Wisdom sits with knowledge. Wisdom stops to listen. Wisdom adjusts. You know, are you lonely? Maybe you're not. But my hunch is most of you are. You're lonely. And here's another thing. If most of us are lonely, then I think we have to take another step and think, okay, most of us are lonely. Utah is a national leader in depression rates. I don't think those are unrelated. And so perhaps the predominant way of living and being that everyone is living and being where we live right now, perhaps the predominant way of living and being doesn't lend itself to taking care of our loneliness. And if that's true, then we need to sit with that knowledge. We need to stop and listen. And we need to adjust. The predominant way of living, I think, in our society, we want to be free. We don't want the restrictions and the rules. You know, autonomy is a heck of a drug. Nobody's telling me what to do with my schedule. I'm going to do what I want, where I want, when I want. Freedom! I think we have a really jacked up view of freedom. Two pictures come to my mind when I think about freedom. The first is a world-class pianist, and I get this from Tim Keller, I think from his book, Reason for God. But he says, with a world-class piano player, you see them like tickling the keys and going back and forth, and there's so much freedom as they're playing, and it's amazing, and you listen, and you can almost hear the freedom as they're just creating this incredible music. But that piano player didn't start being able to play that way. They had to show up at practice. They had to practice some more. They had to grow. They had to learn. They had rules that they had to figure out what keys to play in the key you're playing in, and what keys not to play in the key you're playing in. They had to learn all that. And then when you kind of get that, you get the freedom. The other thing I think of is driving, because I like to drive. I do my best thinking when I'm driving. Driving, I feel free when I'm driving, but there's a speed limit. There is a side of the road I'm supposed to be on. There are lines I'm not supposed to cross. There are stoplights that tell me if I'm supposed to go, slow down, or speed up, or stop. There are stop signs. And I think the way that our culture views freedom is get rid of all the rules and just do what we want. But we actually know that's not real freedom, right? Real freedom has some boundary markers that when you live within those, you live free. You drive free. Wisdom sits with knowledge. Wisdom stops to listen. Wisdom makes adjustments. We're starting a new series called Community Formed by Jesus' Story. And I want our minds to wander today because I don't think they get a chance to. But I wanted them to wander in a certain direction, especially if you're feeling lonely. And that is that in February, we're going to launch community groups. Pumped about it. More information's coming. Community groups are going to meet one night a week. They're going to go February to May. And I can already hear, like, Nate, you want me to give up another weeknight? Don't you know? Don't you know what I have going on? Don't you know about my schedule? Don't you know about things? You want me to give up another weeknight? And I would just ask you a few questions. One, are you lonely? The second, is the way and the rhythm that you're living right now, does that lead to taking care of your loneliness or not. Wisdom sits with knowledge. Wisdom stops to listen. Wisdom adjusts. How are you defining freedom? Maybe it's time to see freedom a little differently for the sake of taking care of a need for community that God put in you. Now, community groups, I'm not promising an insta-fix, and we live in an insta-culture. But I am saying I think that we have to sit with our knowledge. I think we have to stop and listen. I think we have to be willing to make adjustments if we want a different output from what we're getting now. I bet some of you are like, Nate, are you ever going to read the Bible this morning? I am. Again, this is a little unconventional of a message, but I felt like the Lord really put it on my heart. And so, you guys ever wonder why the Bible isn't primarily a list of rules, but it's a story, a big story with a bunch of little mini stories in the middle, creating the big story? I think it's because God wants our minds to wander. Stories kind of conjure up this imagination in us. And we want to be community formed by Jesus' story. Jesus' story has a formative power. It has something in it that if we sit with it, if we stop and listen, if we adjust, it can change us. Mark chapter 5. And we're going to read a story that you might be like, where is he going with this? It's all going to come together, I promise. Mark 5, verse 24. A large crowd followed and pressed around Jesus, and a woman was there who'd been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She'd suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped. She felt in her body she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized power had gone out from him. And he turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. This woman had a condition that affected her social life so much that it led to social isolation. There were people she wasn't allowed to be around. There were places she wasn't allowed to go. There was a God that maybe she thought was really far away. And in her healing, Jesus doesn't just heal her. He restores her to the community that she had lost. Because Jesus is always restoring us into community. Don't miss this. The woman, she was trying other things to make it work. She was chasing after other things. She was doing other things. She was trying to make it work. But what does wisdom do? Wisdom sits with knowledge. It stops and listens. It adjusts. And she hears about Jesus. And she goes to Jesus. And she's healed. Jesus is always about restoring us to community. Community with God, community with one another, and community with our world. A lot of times we have a tendency to treat Jesus' sacrifice for us as a sacrifice for us individually. It absolutely was. Jesus died for you, and for you, and for you, and for you, and for you. He did. He had you in mind. But Jesus didn't die so that you stay alone. Jesus died to put together a community around him who would show the world what God is like. Jesus is always about restoring us to community. And I think it might be time for us to think about our lives and not go straight to knowledge, but get some wisdom, to sit with knowledge, to stop and listen, and to make adjustments, to step out of our knowledge-addicted sea that we're swimming in and drowning in, to step out of the I feel like I'm always making bad trades, to run to Jesus, who's not holding you off. He's ready. He's always ready to run to Jesus like this woman did. And to be healed and restored to community. There's a life Jesus has saved us for. Are we missing it? He's inviting us again. Let's pray. Jesus, we are come to you feeling all sorts of things this morning. But I think we also come to you, a bunch of people like myself, who are just knowledge addicted, but wisdom averse. And Spirit of God, we give you all the permission in the world right now to speak the word you need to speak into our hearts, to call us to the thing you need to call us to. I pray we would listen. In your name.